Good afternoon, and welcome to U.S. History Through Film as we talk about the last days of 1862 in the aftermath of the Battle of Antietam, which was a terribly bloody battle. It remains the single bloodiest day in American military history, with over 26,000 Americans killed and wounded in this battle. There are some battles that overall had more casualties, but those were battles lasting for several days, like the 3 days at Gettysburg, or nearly a month in the Battle of the Bulge in World War II. And the Battle of Antietam could have been a decisive battle. Lee had hoped it would be, a great symbolic victory in an invasion of a Union state. It could, too, have been a great victory for the North had McClellan committed his reserves. He had thousands of men whom he held back, waiting to defend against additional Confederate forces who existed only in his imagination. Had he committed them at any point, in the cornfield, along Bloody Lane, at Burnside's Bridge, he might have carried the day. Instead, the battle is technically a draw. At the end of the day, Lee held most of the ground he had held at the beginning. But Lee's forces were so badly hurt that he chose to withdraw back into Virginia. So, from a strategic sense, the Battle of Maryland, the invasion of Maryland, was a failure. But once again, McClellan had a chance to win a major victory. Had he chased Lee, he might well have caught up and destroyed his army while it was recovering from this battle. Instead, he sat, allowing Lee to survive and fight for nearly 3 more years. Lincoln at last had had enough and finally removed McClellan for good, replacing him with General Ambrose Burnside, who had led troops at the Battle of Antietam. A man who would be so famous for his side whiskers that style of facial hair would come to be known as Burnsides, and eventually as sideburns. But even though Lincoln removed McClellan, clearly being unhappy with the complete outcome of the battle, he declared it to be a Union victory, and now did issue the Emancipation Proclamation, to take effect January 1st, 1863. And officially freeing all slaves in rebellious areas, in hopes that they might revolt, which very few did, but many did run away to freedom. Now slaves escaping from areas still in rebellion were legally free if they escaped to Union lines, whereas previously they were technically supposed to be returned to their owners, although typically were not, aside from some instances very early in the war when they were. And those who did run away sometimes joined the Union Army, which began accepting black volunteers in 1863. In total, about 180,000 colored troops served in the Union Army during the war, often fighting very bravely when they got the chance to fight at all, as they were often kept out of combat. The racism of white officers, even in a war to now end slavery, being such they thought black troops could not be trusted in combat. Early in the war, black soldiers did not receive equal pay to white soldiers. Again, rather than seeing combat, they were often given unpleasant menial tasks, which to be sure had to be done, but didn't really want to be done by white people. Black soldiers also knew that if they were captured by the South, they would be executed. So for the moment, the Emancipation Proclamation is more effective as a symbol than as a law. Strictly speaking, freeing no one the moment that it went into effect. But it was a powerful symbol indeed. After this, European governments, especially the British government, where Parliament was elected by a strongly anti-slavery population, they could not easily side with the Confederacy. Britain and France, prior to this, had been very close to recognizing the Confederacy and offering to help negotiate an end to the war. Now they could not do that. Now, General Burnside knew that McClellan had been too cautious, felt he had to act quickly and decisively, but in fact he too was pretty cautious by nature. And while he felt he needed to invade Virginia, he was not real quick about it, although to be fair, that was not entirely his fault. He planned an invasion of Fredericksburg, Virginia, right across the Rappahannock River from Maryland. But to do so, he would need a bridge, and began building one across pontoon boats. Again, a bridge of planks nailed across a whole line of boats, 2 lines of boats across the river, boats which the Army Supply Department took a very long time to get to Burnside, giving Lee plenty of time to set up his defenses in and especially just south of Fredericksburg. Now, had Burnside been perhaps a bit more active, he really could have gone just a bit upstream, where there were shallow places he could have fairly easily crossed the river and not needed the boats. But having decided to attack Fredericksburg, that's what he was going to do. And again, Lee dug in south of town, many of his men taking shelter behind a stone wall or behind a low ridge known as Marye's Heights. A very strongly defensive position overlooking the big open field between the heights and the town itself. Burnside finally got across the river in mid-December and ordered a charge against Confederate positions December 13th, 1862. The first charge was beaten back by the rifles and cannon of the Confederacy. So he ordered another charge, and another, and another, and another, and another, and another. A total of 14 charges against this wall, all of which were defeated before they ever reached it. Some units lost half their men or more. Many living men were trapped on the battlefield overnight, afraid to move lest they be seen and shot. During the cold December night, some of them used the coats of the dead men next to them as blankets. Others piled up dead men as walls against Confederate bullets. This battle, by the way, is one of several battles early in the war in the Eastern Theater depicted in the movie Gods and Generals, released in 2003 and based on a novel of the same name. The movie as a whole, though, is very long, and so I do not typically show the entire movie, but at least one of the charges against the heights at Fredericksburg is worth a watch if you have the time. In particular, the battle between the Irish Brigade, made up primarily of Irish immigrants to the north, and Cobb's Legion, made up primarily of Irish immigrants who had settled in Georgia, is a particularly powerful scene. The next day, the 14th of December, Burnside considered leading his old 9th Corps in one last attack on the wall, a suicide mission, I suppose, to make up for all the destruction he had caused the day before, but his officers talked him out of it. And the Battle of Fredericksburg came to an end, a great Confederate victory. The North suffered over 13,000 men killed and wounded, the South around 4,200, most of them at one end of the line, which was not fully protected by the walls and hills as other parts were. On December 15th, Burnside retreated back across the river into Maryland and was soon afterwards replaced by General Joseph Hooker, who had also led forces at Antietam.